The front of the German column buckled at the unexpected sight. Just over 60 Russians in catastrophic respiratory failure hauled themselves through the poison gas. They desperately charged along the railway embankment and out of the trenches on either side to drive their bayonets into the German front rank. Through the lethal green mist of the pre-dawn darkness, they defied biochemistry to assault a force that outnumbered them 100 to 1. The repulsion of the German advance at the Osowiec Fortress in what is now northeastern Poland was the final violent defense of a geographical bottleneck that held the map of the 20th century in place. In the summer of 1915, the Russian Empire was attempting a massive fighting withdrawal to avoid total encirclement. Osowiec, a four-fort complex of brick, limestone, and concrete, sunk deep into earthen ramparts, was the hinge of that movement. If the Germans took Osowiec Fortress, the Russian front would snap, trapping 500,000 men, and potentially granting Germany and the Central Powers a winnable one-front war. But the surrounding geography was formidable. To the north and south of Osowiec Fortress lay the Boba marshes, a prehistoric labyrinth of peat bogs and reed beds that stretched for 50 miles in every direction. There was no stable ground for advancing or repositioning the massive siege artillery the Germans needed to take the Russian stronghold. The only reliable ground for 50 miles was the Sosnia embankment. This was a man-made ridge of hard-packed earth and stone, carrying the railway that was the main artery of the Russian supply line. Osowiec was the lock on the gate. For 6 months, Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg had applied the physics of force. He deployed Big Bertha howitzers, 420mm monsters that threw shells weighing over 2,000 pounds. While the fortress's concrete and earth-shielded walls absorbed the direct hits, the shells also pounded the forward embankment, churning the narrow approach into a landscape of craters 30 feet deep. Inside the fortress, the defenders lived in a subterranean world of damp, unventilated bunkers. The 226th Zemlyansky Regiment stayed in the lower magazines, waiting out the bombardment. By August, Hindenburg accepted that ballistics alone would not clear the path. The fortress was too thick, and the bogs were too soft to move the guns closer. He turned instead to fluid dynamics. He ordered General Major Rudolf von Freudenburg to deploy 150 tons of a chlorine-bromine mix, a massive industrial-scale application of chemical warfare that, until that summer, had no precedent in the history of human conflict. Freudenburg's engineers installed 30 elaborate gas release stations, spaced at 400-foot intervals along the lip of the marsh, hiding them in the brush. They knew the pre-dawn stillness would allow the cloud to behave like a liquid, seeking every low point in the geography. At 4 a.m. on August 6th, the German engineers turned the master valves on the 30 hidden gas batteries. Within seconds, the jets fanned out and merged, forming a dense yellow-green wall 30 feet high and miles wide. 150 tons of chlorine and bromine rolled over the marsh grass at the pace of a slow walk. It scourged the valley floor, flash desiccating plant life into brittle husks immediately upon contact. As the gas wall reached the Russian forward bridgehead, the chemistry of the valley was reconfigured. Because the vapors were heavier than the atmosphere, they behaved like a liquid, a necrotic fluid, sliding into the trench lines and pouring down the fortress ventilation shafts, reaching the subterranean magazines where steel shells could never penetrate. Chlorine seeks moisture. When the cloud reached the Russian 9th, 10th, and 11th companies, the gas bonded instantly with the humidity in the men's eyes, throats, and lungs. The resulting chemical reaction, the formation of hydrochloric acid within the body, triggered a catastrophic physiological breakdown. On the front lines, some 1,600 men entered a state of physiological collapse. Almost all those in the outer trenches died instantly, their bodies slumping into the waist-deep pools of poison that settled into the bottom of the pits. Their skin deepened to a bruised purple as their organs failed. The gas was hostile to machines as well. The chemical saturation acted as a universal corrosive. Copper components in the field telephones crumbled into green dust, and the firing pins of the Russian rifles seized within their bolts. By 4:15 a.m., the forward sector was a silent zone of occupation. The gas continued its drift, seeping into the central fortress, where it took another 400 Russians. Inside the central citadel, 21-year-old officer Vladimir Kotlinsky was in a low-ceilinged casemate, trapped in this same architectural drain. For a makeshift face mask, he soaked his undershirt in urine, which he knew would partially neutralize the chlorine, stalling the acidic reaction in his lungs just enough to maintain consciousness. Kotlinsky gathered several dozen others who hadn't already succumbed. Because the gas had seized the internal firing pins of their Mosin-Nagants, they attached bayonets. The German column moved between the forward trenches past poisoned remnants of the 9th Company. Freudenborg, observing from the rear, believed the path into the fortress was clear. The Germans wore rubberized masks, which hallowed their breathing and limited their peripheral vision to 30 degrees. Kotlinsky's group charged toward them through the poison gas's residual mist for 1,000 yards. They became visible only at close combat range. At the same time, scattered surviving Russians from the forward trenches, disorganized and dying, began to claw their way out of the gas and mud and up both sides of the embankment to join the counterattack. The collision on the embankment was chaotic. The first German rank, hindered by the fogging lenses of their rubber masks, failed to aim effectively. They encountered a force that bore the physical marks of the gas. Men with faces bound in dramatically stained rags and skin darkened by oxygen deprivation. Men they thought were already dead. It was an accidental pincer, a shocking visage. The front rank had recoiled at the unexpected thrashing survivors, but the 7,000 unaware Germans further back in line continued to push forward. The opposing pressures forced German soldiers off the reinforced earthwork and into the black water bogs. The weight of their 60-pound packs anchored them in the peat. When the first Russian bayonets found their targets, the German line was in hydraulic collapse. Surviving Russian artillerymen in the citadel with failing eyes began to find the range. Their heavy fortress guns, too massive to be seized by the corrosion that had ruined their rifles, still functioned. They couldn't see, so they fired by memory. The heavy shells landed in the center of the fleeing mass, eroding the remaining German offensive in a spray of granite ballast and gray wool. The Germans retreated in panic.
Lauf dein Leben!
Kotlinsky died that evening in the fortress infirmary. By the end of the week, nearly every man who fought with him was dead. Their internal organs were too damaged. They had traded their remaining hours of existence for the chance to repel the perpetrators of the chemical attack. Of the 3,000 Russians stationed in the forward garrison, over 2,200 were officially listed as casualties of the gas and the subsequent combat. The actual number of survivors is unknown. The German casualties exceeded 1,000 men, lost to the bayonet charge, the bogs, and the final artillery bombardment. Osowiec Fortress held for 3 more weeks. When the Russians finally evacuated on August 18th, they had planted enough dynamite to pulverize the limestone foundations, denying the German military its strategic prize: a stable platform for heavy siege guns, a logistical hub for the interior advance, and defensible shelter for 10,000 men. The delay allowed the Russian army to complete its great retreat, preventing a total encirclement of the Tsar's forces and keeping Russia in World War I for 2 more years. This forced Germany to keep millions of men pinned in the east, preventing a massive reinforcement of the Western Front that might have ended the war in a victory for the Central Powers. The chemical attack was brutally lethal, but the German offensive backfired, turning into a rout at the hands of less than 100 men who refused to die just yet.